All right, now if the AV guy quits messing with me, are we recording? Awesome, all right, yay! Thanks for the one guy who applauded in the room for getting the AV fixed. So again, now that we have AV going, my name is Matt Sheurer. You may follow me on Twitter at C3RKAH or on LinkedIn, and also the slide deck is available, so check it out if you want. Today's talk is called Lend Me Your IRs. So I'm going to have to kind of go in fast mode here since we lost some time. But I'm a senior system security engineer at First Financial Bank. In Cincinnati, Ohio, I run the SIMPA Security SIG. If you're ever around Cincinnati, third Thursday of any month, we meet and have awesome sort of B-sides quality meetings. And I'm also a Bug Crowd ambassador and security researcher. So today's objectives are we're going to show live demo reenactments of real attacks. And it's going to be on how these real-world attacks worked, how and why they defeated security solutions, and then we're going to show incident responses to these attacks, demoing the investigation tools and techniques, as well as discuss lessons learned and key takeaways. So we're all on the same page. To start it off with, the acronyms I'm going to use and throw about here are IOC, which is Indicator of Compromise, IR, which is Incident Response, and DFIR, which is Digital Forensics and Incident Response. So you may hear these bantied about throughout today's talk. So some quick disclaimers here, that the demos are all based on 100% true stories. They dutifully recreate actual attacks. However, I've altered a lot of the details. So the investigation demos are sped up considerably in the interest of time. And also, when you do these techniques, only do so on a dedicated, securely isolated, and volatile sandbox. And if you're like me, if you have a commercial sandbox, use that. If you don't have that, then use something like SIFT or Remnux, or build out your own. Whatever you want to do there. I'm just here to give you an informative InfoSec talk. I'm not your parent, and I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. I don't know how many speakers here at HackerCon are doing live demos. However, I am one doing them, and it's either because I'm bold, fearless, or crazy. Please pick two, so I'm not just crazy. All right, so my first scenario is called the mystery attachment. And so going back to a news headline, on August 17th of 2018, mouse spam campaigns target banks using Microsoft Publisher. The flawed Amy rat was part of the Nakurs botnet, as reported by researchers at TrustWave. And if you get the slide deck, here's the link to the article down at the bottom. Got re-reported in numerous places, but best I could tell, they were the ones who put it out first. So to set the table, one day I'm diligently working at my desk, probably on like half a dozen things at one time, and all of a sudden, in the midst of my working on whatever I was working on, have a important person running up to my desk and say, "Matt, help, one of our VIPs with access to lots of sensitive information just got hit in that recent mouse spam campaign targeting banks. It matches IOCs from reports of that new flawed Amy rat, which is part of the Nakurs botnet. The recipient attempted to open the MS Publisher attachment on their smartphone. I need you to drop whatever you are doing and investigate this. We'll get the attachment to you as soon as possible." Now, I am not a mobile forensics expert. We don't necessarily maybe have great tools for that, but I'm the closest person we have and that can look at it. So, all right, we'll take a look, see what we can figure out here. So I get the attachment, and we'll go ahead and open it. Now, when I'm demoing stuff here, we have to pretend that I'm using a sandbox. These are live demos. I've built a custom environment here, and in the interest of time, I don't have time to fire up a proper sandbox. So when you see me doing this stuff in the talk, just imagine, if you will, that I'm doing this in a sandbox, like in real life. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up here, and let me see if I can get the optimal width so it's not such an eye chart. So open up this publisher file in the sandbox, and I see this text that the macros basically have to be enabled to display the contents. Click the Enable Content button. What was really interesting is I couldn't actually get that to pop up and execute the macro. I couldn't get the prompt to make it happen. And I thought, well, this is odd because clearly that's how this thing would appear to be staged. I've seen this type of thing before. Chances are a lot of people in this room have seen this kind of thing before. So anyway, I'm detonating it in the sandbox to get the analysis on it. And when I get the detailed analysis report on it, it didn't really necessarily look particularly bad. Couldn't really find any signs of here's something malicious. So I'm thinking, well, that's definitely odd. But let's try to understand, sort of what's happening with it. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back into my folder. And I will maximize this and blow it up so everybody can see it better. So there's my publisher file. Hopefully folks can see that okay. I can maybe expand it just a little bit more. So what I want to do is run through strings, just this, oops, helps if I tab complete that. So what I want to do is run this thing through strings. Oops. Oh, you know what? I'm going to pipe it out to less. Now I could basically direct this output to a text file and open up in an editor of my choosing. If I don't redirect it to a file, I can basically pipe it out to less and just kind of scroll through it here and see if there's anything that stands out. Maybe some sort of an artifact left in there in plain text, or maybe some sort of a character string I can basically search on to figure out who's done this. I really didn't find anything crazy in here. Nothing told me like, hey, this is necessarily awful. So go ahead and quit out of there. Clear that up. So as I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, well, let's go ahead and get a hash of this file, since I'm not understanding at this point exactly what it's doing. So I'm going to go ahead and, so I type in the right command. SHA-256 sum and the file name, and here I have the hash for the file. So anybody who sees that, think, all right, let's go ahead and do some searching on this. Clicked the wrong thing there. So I know that you're not going to be able to see the URL, but there's the hash value, the same one we were just looking at. This is virus total, which has about 70 some odd AV scanners. Nothing has seen this particular file, which I found interesting because usually that's the kind of attachment that will get repurposed. It could be, customized, a new variant of it, something like that. But I really thought, had a good chance of finding a result. So here you can see a little better with Gesundheit. Here you can see a little better with the hash value, but you can also see nothing again was found. So the question is, what else? Let's take a look on hybrid analysis. A lot of people submit to there to see if they can find stuff. Again, no results found. And you can see, you can't see it real well, but basically the hash value and the URL up above. It says last resort. Let's just search for it on Google. And again, absolutely no results. So at this point, I'm not really sure what I have. I can't really understand what it's doing. It's basically defeating every security scanner app that I'm throwing at it. And I found nothing in strings. Never seen the hash anywhere. And I'm really contemplating, what's my next step now on this mobile device? And I'm just thinking, well, do we say, well, chances a publisher file is going to do something super malicious on an iPhone, for example, is unlikely, and think it's an acceptable risk. It seems like a really bad idea, so I kind of instantly set that one aside. And then I think, well, what if we did a security wipe on a mobile device and then gave it back to the user? Would that be adequate enough to safely say risk is pretty low, that something happened here? But again, thinking who this is and the type of information they could have, it doesn't seem like a good idea. Now, they weren't ready for a refresh quite yet, but they were pretty close to it. So I'm thinking, well, perhaps what we want to do here is actually commandeer the device, shut it down, throw it in the forensics lab, and essentially order them an updated model and go ahead and replenish that user with a new device anyway. As I'm thinking through all these thoughts in my head, I thought, well, this is kind of lame, but I didn't actually look at the EXIF data. And in Windows, it's pretty simple. You right-click on the file, you go into the properties, and you look on the details tab, and you look for things like author or other hints. You always have to take that stuff with a grain of salt, but it's pretty easy to do. In Linux, if I use the Perl EXIF tool, I can take a look at that. So let me go ahead and pull up the file here. And as I'm looking at it, all of these things that seem like a little weird on the file type and the extension and the MIME type, all that matches Microsoft Publisher to a T. So it's definitely a genuine publisher file, no doubt about that. Now the author didn't say test fish, but I will give you an idea what it did actually show me. Let me go ahead and pull up the next slide. What it was a facepalm moment, because it was our test phishing vendor was the author. Now, I spent hours looking into this, trying to understand what it did. Online research, you name it. I was looking at details around the bad Amy flaw, looking for IOCs that I could sort of look at, what traits, characteristics. I was contemplating doing some memory forensics on it, even though it's not my bread and butter. I dabbled in it a little bit. So I spent all that time, but not taking that as a grain of salt, because obviously the EXIF data could be spoofed. I went to the mail server and I looked at the headers, and sure enough, it came from the mail server at our phishing vendor, test phishing vendor. What I saw for the IP address is, yes, Matt, this really is your test phishing vendor's IP address. You dolt. So it's okay, you can laugh at my pain. But let's talk about what went wrong. So what went wrong is I got caught up in the moment, subconsciously letting somebody else influence my investigation. Their anxiety and their bad assumptions honestly wore off on me. They were like super amped up about it, and it got me worked up as a result. And they were talking about the attachment, and I got so honed in and focused on the attachment that really I lost sight of my own processes and procedures, which namely, and I've given a lot of phishing forensics talks, a lot of different conferences, was always start with the email headers. And so I abandoned it this one time, and I lost focus on what I was doing. So the road to redemption here was painful lessons learned for reminders to stick to my standard investigative processes and procedures. If I would have started by looking at the headers first, instead of getting buried into the attachment, I could have closed out this investigation in minutes instead of hours. But since it was a false alarm, in a sense, there are no further technical actions required on this one. So scenario 2 is security scanner evasion. So what happened in the environment is identical phishing emails started hitting inboxes, and wild-scaled reports of phishing came pouring in. The phishing page link no longer appeared to be working in my security scanner. Was the malicious site taken offline already? Let's investigate and find out. So the investigation will start by looking at the message source and looking for hyperlinks. Then we're going to look at the demo page with or the landing page rather, with a security scanner solution, or a pretend one in this case. And then we're going to look at the source code and open the phishing page in our sandbox. So let's go ahead and do those things. So let me go ahead and pull up the phishing email here. And I will blow this up so everybody can see it here. Now, there are parts of this you won't be able to see in the room in the headers, unfortunately, but it's from evil.scammer@promisewearelegit.com. The subject is, this link is totally safe, and it's to phishing target, which is unwittingvictim@randomtarget.org. And the email, as you see, says, hello, phishing target. We have a really important message for you. To retrieve your message, click here. Real subtle, right? Regards, spoof sender. Now, in spite of the fact that there were more red flags in this message than he could find inside of Vladimir Putin's garage, as souvenirs from his old KGB days, you know if I sent this out as a test phishing campaign, there's probably at least that one person in everybody's organization that's still going to click on that link, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the source code here. In Thunderbird, we would do that under View and Message Source. Make that a little bit bigger. Oops. All right, so here's our URL from the phishing email. So what happens when we look at that inside of a security scanner? Go ahead and pull this up. So I pull it in, get a screenshot of it. 404 error. Like we've all seen this, right? It's when a resource is taken offline, it's not available, something's happened to the server, you name it. Essentially, this 404 message is, hey, it's already gone. So nothing to worry about, right? We just close this case and move on, or at least, we could do that, but we might want to dig just a little bit deeper. So clear that up. And so what we want to do is go ahead and see if we can grab this information. So we'll go ahead and do curl, and I've still got the website address copied in here. Then we'll do output, and we'll call it unknown.html. That's one way to retrieve it. We could also use wget. So let me go ahead and do wget and paste in the URL. Now, if we look at these, we'll notice that they're the same file size. If I basically do a SHA-256 sum, both of these files have the same SHA-256 hash value. So forensically, it doesn't really matter a whole lot which we're using. Now, some of you might say, well, the timestamp's different. We got one from today's date. That's only because of the demo environment. In real life, it's going to show you whatever the, if you use wget, it's going to show you the time that you retrieved it. Since it's just grabbing a local copy in this case, it doesn't actually change that. So in real life, you wouldn't have that benefit of seeing the original date. But you can tell from the hash value, the file size, these are basically the same file. So it doesn't really matter which method you use in this case. They both work the same for our purposes. So let's go ahead and pull up the index.html file to see what was going on with it. So I'll blow this up here a little bit, and I've made this as easy to understand as possible. But basically, what's going on is we're doing some user agent checks in the source code here, and it's looking for things like Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Opera, and Safari. And if it matches one of those user agent strings, it sends it to a different page. If it is not matching one of those, it sends the traffic to a 404 error page. I thought that was pretty clever because that actually did fool at least one security scanner that I threw at it. It wasn't until I actually opened up the website address in a new browser that it came through. So we'll go ahead and do that and see what that looks like. And so in the sandbox, when I pull it up, what we essentially have is an Office 365 credential harvesting site. So the site's still live in spite of the first impression that looks like, hey, this thing was actually taken down. So by digging a little bit deeper, we can see what happened. So let's go ahead and talk about it a little more. Just some observations I had from that. So we talked about the user agent string-based redirection. I got lucky in this case. They used JavaScript, because if they had used a server-side language like PHP or Python or any number of them, that's not even a full representative list, but some of the popular ones, I wouldn't have seen it, because you need, essentially privileged server access to actually see that on the server side. If it's not your server that was compromised, probably not going to get that, at least not legally. And most places aren't just going to let you hop on their server and take a ride to see, hey, can I see what your hacked web server code looked like? Probably not going to be too supportive unless you happen to work like law enforcement, maybe. Something I thought about is, this technique could actually be used by threat actors. Let's say they had an exploit kit that only worked on Firefox as an arbitrary example. What they could do is they could actually check to see if visitors have the Firefox browser. If they do, direct them to the exploit payload page, and then round robin redirect them back to the real page. Those browser redirects happen so fast, most users aren't even going to notice. Probably wouldn't even see it. It's going to happen so fast. And then meanwhile, it would direct everything else to the actual page. It's going to make it really hard to detect, because unless your security tools are sending user agent strings of Firefox, in our example, it's not necessarily going to hit that. And you could get very detailed with that. You could even look for specific vulnerable versions and do the same thing. So threat actors could really sort of take that to the next level. And in terms of the first one, server-side languages, I think I've actually seen that one in the wild just a month ago, where one browser took me to one page and another browser took me to a different page. And I couldn't tell from the source code what was happening. So I suspect that they actually were using that first technique that I was talking about there. So our remediation plan for this was we determined where the actual phishing landing page was at, and we blocked it through web content filtering. And then this wide-scale phishing campaign, we worked with our secure email gateway vendor to block the active phishing campaign. The last scenario I'm going to talk about is I call it the rabbit hole. And so to preface this one, I received a request from a user to investigate an email message they received to determine if it's legitimate or not. The email certainly looked like it could be fishy at first glance, but is it just suspicious or is it malicious? And I gave a talk by this title. My favorite version is B-Sides Cleveland. If you search YouTube on B-Sides Cleveland, is it just suspicious or is it malicious? You can find that talk if you're interested in seeing it. So, the investigation side, I could tell, and we'll take a look at this in a minute, but from the message headers, the source IP was a mismatch. But the message source code was particularly interesting. I noticed that the hyperlink didn't actually go to where the link text said it did. We'll look at that here in just a second. And then the malicious threat actor's objective appeared to be a credential harvesting site for the purposes of account takeover. So let's look at this stuff. Let me go ahead and open up our phishing email here. And it's from PayPal support, pp support@pwn-server.org. And the subject is PayPal bank account change confirmation. And against to our unwitting victim phishing target. And it's, dear PayPal customer, your request to update your bank account on file will complete in the next 4 hours. If you didn't request this change, log into your PayPal account to reject the pending activity. Now, if you have a PayPal account and you're an unsuspecting user, you think, wait a minute, this is crazy, man. I didn't initiate a bank account change. I need to log in and refute this or reject the change because I've only got 4-hour window to do it, right? That sense of urgency, that's that lure. And you look at the URL and it's like, yeah, that's a legitimate PayPal login page link. Looks good. But let's go ahead and take a look at the message source on this one as well. Make it a little bigger. So notice the link text actually shows, the PayPal sign-in. But if we look at the actual hyperlink, it's, some .be site, which is in Belgium. And in this case, it's a demo attack destination 1. So we look at that and we think, well, already we've got our first layer of obfuscation because the link text doesn't match the actual hyperlink. Obviously, we're not going to gain anything by copying the legitimate PayPal address, so we'll go ahead and grab the phishing link to understand what's happening here, and to sort of show everybody what that would look like. Oops. Oh, I see what happened. I added href. Sorry, folks, I copied too much. All right, so here we go. So, fake PayPal login page. Looks like the PayPal login page. So people enter their credentials in here and go through that process. Now the threat actors have their PayPal username and password. Anybody think that their next step is going to be to log into PayPal and transfer some funds? Probably a pretty good chance. Or go on a shopping trip for a fake store. Also, maybe use these credentials to find other payment services. Hey, are they using the same password, username password on Amazon? Probably going to try some credential stuffing. They've got account credentials for one site. Service, probably go to the others. Yeah, so actually, the address does sort of display. What's interesting is we started off in Belgium, but what we have here, what we're looking at a compromised server in Germany. It's a .de domain. So already we've sort of got another weird obfuscation going on here, where it's not the first page, but we're actually looking at something else. So let's go ahead and curl, and we'll grab that URL here. And we'll output that to a first file. Output, -- output. We'll call it firstpage.html. And we'll go ahead and open this up so everybody can see it inside of an editor. Now this was the URL from the actual phishing email, the actual hyperlink. What's interesting is I log in and look at it here, and it's actually doing an HTTP meta refresh. That's how we got from the request in Belgium. Now it's redirecting to another compromised web host in Germany. So very interesting. And what we want to do to understand is kind of repeat that process and look at the source code at the German page. So we'll go ahead and repeat that process. We'll do another curl, and we'll put in that web URL -- output, and we'll call it second page.html. We have that, so go ahead and do gedit, and we'll do second page, and the ampersand so it's in a detached window. Oops. And we'll blow that up. And what's interesting is it looked like we were on that German page, right? But actually we really weren't, because what it had inside the code was actually an iframe going to another host. So there's another compromised web server, and it's in another different country. Now we're in the Netherlands. Now we're doing a whole European tour on this one phishing email. So we've gone for the first layer of obfuscation of hyperlink text not matching the link text not matching the hyperlink. We've got a meta refresh, and then we've got an iframe. So now we've got another layer of obfuscation. This is really becoming the rabbit hole, which is why I titled the attack that for that reason. So we'll go ahead and get the final destination and see what that looks like. So we'll go ahead and curl. We'll paste that in here again. We'll do a -- output, third page.html. Now, I'm just going to do gedit here because it's easy for me to make that readable. Oops. Paste in that URL we copied from, again, the second country server. Now we're on the third. Oops. needed third page. Third page. Proceed. So, bunch of gobbledygook that we're looking at here. Like, this isn't readable. Like, we're no longer redirecting and iframing and stuff like that. We've got basically what boils down to a mess. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like in real life when we punch in that URL. We'll use Google's built-in developer tools to help us out, which are really great. Someday I'd love to do just a talk on using built-in browser developer tools for forensics. So we'll take a look at the HTML and let's see if I can make this a little better. So it's not great. What we're kind of looking at here, so we've got a document write and an unescape, and we got a big sequence here. And then that's followed by this df and another big sequence. Now I've intentionally put white space in to make this more readable. And I know looking at it, some of you are thinking, that's readable? Well, it kind of isn't, but just to kind of break it down a little bit what we're looking at here. So we've got the document write and the unescape sequence. What we can guess is that this is creating the sequence and it's feeding in a function into it, this sequence here, to basically produce the output. Now in the olden days, you used to have to unescape this to basically understand the formula that makes the rest of the stuff work. Fortunately now the browser developer tools are so good, the best important thing to remember is that if it's renderable in a browser, it has to be something that can be decoded. The good news is we don't have to necessarily do all that stuff by hand anymore. We can actually scroll down past all the encoded stuff. And now we can actually see, using the browser developer tools, what was in there. And so here's the formula. It's nice and decoded for us. We can actually see the HTML code that makes that work. Something that's more interesting, you're like, well, I thought you decoded it. There's more gobbledygook. Actually, what this is there's base64 encoding inside of this JavaScript encoded page. So now we have encoded elements inside of an encoded page. So this is getting really deep. We'll talk about this stuff here in a moment. We'll keep kind of looking at it. And all of a sudden we've got another base64 encoded item. And we can guess based on the MIME type here that it's an image file that's base64 encoded. And just kind of looking at it, we'll go ahead and take a look at the sources. The good thing is that with, the network tab, and we'll look at the image. Let me go ahead and reload that page real quick here. Come back in. Let's see here. You know what? I think it's because, hold on, let me get that link out of here and paste it back in. It's not actually rendering it there because that's that iframe that we were looking at. Yeah, just relaunch a new Google window here just to make sure. Fire up developer tools again. We'll come back, paste in. Again, this is the actual final landing page that we found through our forensic trail. All right, so now here we find within the headers we can look at the data image, and here's that base64 image. And the nice thing is we hit the preview tab up the top and it actually shows us what the image file is. It decodes it for us automatically, which is fantastic. That's just saving us work right there. But you'll notice it only finds one image. There are actually two base64 encoded elements inside of this. So let's go back and take a quick look at that and just kind of show you, if we do this stuff by hand, what that looks like. So our first item didn't show up in that list, which is basically this long base64 encoded string. So what I want to do is go ahead and just copy this out. If it'll let me. we go. Get to the bottom. And let me back off. So I'm grabbing the stuff inside the quotes here. Oops, missing the last two. There we go. All right, let me open up a new gedit and just create a new tab. Paste all this stuff in here. And we'll go ahead and save it to our DFIR folder. And we'll just call it unknown.ico. Save it out. And so what I'm thinking, again, based on the MIME type here, and what we're seeing is, you can see in here, shortcut icon, data for the MIME type, data, image, X icon, base 64. So I'm guessing this is an icon file. So let's go ahead and, now that we have it, oops. Here's our file, but we can't just look at it as it is, so we have to decode that. So we'll go ahead and base 64-D, and it's unknown.ico, and we'll basically redirect that output to favicon.ico. Oh, I did? Yeah, there we go. Thank you for that. That's a typo. Thanks for good catch. All right, so let's see what that looks like. So I'm just going to launch Chrome, and we'll call up the favicon ICO file, and there it is. Sure enough, if we go back to the compromised website, oops, that was on the first tab. You can see, I know it's really tiny, but up here in the top, you maybe can't see it real well, but yeah, sure enough, it's our fav icon for the page. So that's how we would sort of go back and do that stuff by hand. Go ahead and pull this back up. Oops. So the first destination, we talked about it, went to a page in one foreign country. The second page was in yet another foreign country, and then the landing page went to a compromised web host in another foreign country. We got the source code on that stuff. The malicious threat actors used JavaScript encoding to avoid analysis and detection while hiding the page source, and we certainly saw that in action. So we decoded the source page using built-in browser developer tools. And so the encoded elements, whether the threat actors use encoded elements to avoid analysis and detection or keep the entire site as a single page file, they use base 64 encoded elements within their JavaScript encoded page. So by decoding the elements using the developer tools, we could see what the image files, or at least the one was, and then looked at doing that by hand. A remediation plan in this instance, we determined the final landing page, again, is that third compromised server in the foreign country, and that was the first thing I blocked. Then went back through and got the intermediary one, so we blocked the other two as well. And then I reported the web compromises through the Whois contacts. I don't think I heard back from any of them, but I made at least the effort on my part. And they were blocked for our users. So with that, that's really the demos and the scenarios I had for you today. But as you see me wandering around HackerCon, and I'll be here all weekend, please stop by, talk to me, share your own digital forensic incident response stories. With that, friends, Romans, HackerCon attendees, lend me your IRs. So with that, we'll go ahead and open up for questions. Anybody have anything? All right, going once, going twice. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.